come in as they come in. So thank you very much for attending this version of the BES Seminar Series. Tonight we're going to be hosting an environmental career panel. So when I was your age, I always wondered what can an environmental career look like and what sort of advice can I get in terms of structuring and thinking about my environmental career. So this panel was designed for exactly that reason. So basically what we've done is we've brought together 4 esteemed, distinguished speakers from the environmental field, different sectors in the environmental field, to come in here, share their thoughts about environmental careers, share their thoughts about their career journeys, and hopefully have a very engaged discussion with all of you in a question and answer. Basically how this is going to happen is this. Right after I finish with this quick introduction, I'm going to introduce each speaker, and then we're going to launch very quickly into them being able to talk. Each of them are going to talk for 15 minutes, and after that we'll have a good 40-minute or so session for question, answer, and discussion. So be thinking about your questions, be thinking about things that you find interesting that they said, and ways that you can engage with these speakers, because they're happy to be here, and I hope you're all happy that they're here too. I'm not going to introduce them too well, because I think part of the point is that they have to tell their own story. So just very quickly, here on our panel we have Jaideep Panwar from Sustainalytics. We have Bhavani Prakash from Eco Walk the Talk and Green Color Asia. We have Dr. Isabel Lewis from WWF International Asia Pacific Program, and we have Annabelle Ng from National Parks Board. So we're just going to launch very quickly right into the talks by the speakers with Jaideep going first. Jaideep, I'll pass it on to you.
Thanks, Dr. Hastings, and well, I'm really happy to be here. Quite excited actually, because I was a student here several years ago, not on the BES. I think the BES is a new program, but on the Masters in Environmental Management program. So it's nice to be back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to split this up into 2 or 3 different parts. My conversation is first about the company and what we do, not so much because I want to be making some kind of advertising pitch, but what we do is quite different. It's not very common in this region, so it's just to give you a sense of what this industry is about. And then I'll talk you through a little bit of what my thinking process was and how I have eventually landed up here, and then some thought for you. At this point, what should you be thinking about? What are the things that I would like to have thought about at this stage? So, very quickly, about Sustainalytics, yes? And just a little bit of a clarification at the start. These are personal views, so I'm going to be as relaxed and comfortable as possible, and this is a candid conversation. So, Sustainalytics is a global company. We've got our headquarters based in Amsterdam. Our major offices are Amsterdam and Toronto, and Singapore is our Asian hub. We are ESG research providers to institutional investors. Now, ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Corporate Governance Research. How do investments and environmental, social governance things fit together? I won't go into the details of this, but I'll just give you a very quick gist of the story. So, some of this ESG conversation has its origins in ethical discussions in terms of, say, for example, you had various churches that had funds, and they found themselves investing in various companies or other asset classes, and they found themselves investing in say gambling industries. They didn't realize that was what the investment manager chose. So naturally it became a little bit problematic in terms of reputation. You don't want to be a church or a religious institution and then find yourself invested in controversial or iffy companies. That then moved to investments or certain question marks about investments in companies that are involved in controversial businesses that tend to have certain more significant environmental or social impacts. And what we're now seeing is from the ethical or the the side which is more in terms of values on an ethical base, we're also seeing more mainstream investors or conventional investors who are looking to derive a certain alpha, that is, positive return or beta that's reducing risk, that they feel that certain long-term environmental, social trends, and then you add on top of that corporate governance, are important to the returns that they make. So say, for example, I'll keep it simple. If I'm investing in a company and I'm investing in a company in a long term, let's take, for example, what sector should I pick? I'm thinking of an environmental case. If I invest in a paper and forestry company, and let's take, say, a food company, and it relies on certain deforestation, which is controversial, and we find that regulation is going to become more and more strict on that point, then maybe your supply chain will be more constrained. Let's look at companies that rely on, say, for example, dairy as input, and that's part of the supply chain. With climate change, there are certain impacts that could take place on the dairy supply chain, and therefore, as an investor, I think it's potentially important in the long term. Now, very quickly, we find that investors who buy into responsible investing or ESG investing, we think that that market is growing. It's a market that's primarily had its base in North America and Europe, and we see that there's potential in Asia, but we think that there's still a long way to go in Asia. Next, well, as I said, we provide environmental, social, and governance inputs to our institutional investor clients, and I'll skip the parts in terms of various awards that we've won, but tying into who we are a global company. We've got offices around the world. We've got people with different backgrounds. Certain people who've got backgrounds in environmental sciences. We've got certain people who've got backgrounds in environmental management, in social sciences, some with backgrounds in the financial space. So it's a mix of people. But what drives us quite commonly is the values that we have a sense of impact, that we'd like to see from the investing side, that businesses are, in the long run, have a positive impact. Now, that's as much as I want to say about the company. Just that was to give you a context. About my own decisions and how I found myself here, I think the earliest phase was that I started thinking about career and work a little late. At your stage, in the early stages of my bachelor's, I wasn't thinking about this being important in terms of in my professional life. And very soon as I finished my bachelor's program, I thought, well, at the end of my career, if I'm going to be asking myself a question as to what will I look back at and what will I see, and if I assess it only in terms of the bank balance that I have and in terms of what position that I rise to, will there be a sense of hollowness? So at that point, I felt, well, I really need to do something that motivates me, that drives me, and that I have a positive impact. And that's where I came to the Masters in Environmental Management program at NUS. From there, I went to the consulting space with Ernst & Young, and they've got a climate change and sustainability services practice. So there I spent some time with consulting for various companies on broad sustainability issues in India, and helping companies identify, on our environmental and social aspects, what are the issues that are most important to us? What are the issues that we should be tackling because that's the right thing to do? What are the issues that we should be tackling because these are long-term business issues that will affect us? Say, for example, you could find companies that don't track their water consumption, that don't know what the scenario is around in their regions as to where or how water availability levels would be affected in future, and how that could perhaps impact business. So looking at those kinds of businesses. And then I felt that on the investor side, if I looked at, say, I was quite curious about investors and how, as a consultant, you're brought in and you can present your point of view and you can say, well, company, you can do this or that. But the power to be able to convince, I thought at that point, was, well, if I'm representing an investor who has a say in the business because I own part of the company, then I'd be able to be more convincing. And that's where I came to a company called Responsible Research, which has since been acquired by Sustainalytics. So at Sustainalytics and previously at Responsible Research, we look at issues from the outside of how environmental trends and social trends could impact companies and provide input to investors to use that information in making their investment decisions. And some of these investors make decisions on the basis of these are the right things to do, that's on a values basis, and some of them make these decisions based on this is important because this could have implications on the returns that I derive from my investments. I'm just curious, how many more minutes do I have? 5 more? Okay, well, in terms of things that I would have liked to have thought of at this point of my career, I'd say, and I kind of scratched my head about this, and I said, well, let me just plant myself a little bit further behind and see. I think you need to be conscious that the awareness that the choices that you make, the internships that you do, the things that you show interest in over the next few years have some professional ramifications. At your age, I didn't realize this. I didn't think about it as seriously. I'm not saying that you need to be super serious about everything, but just in terms of internship opportunities that you have, in terms of what kind of volunteering activities that you do, what kind of readings that you do, I think it makes you more complete as a person. I say this from a recruiter's point of view as well. I interview a number of people, and I find that I'll come to this a little later, but I'd also say this relates to a point that don't only focus on your coursework. Your coursework is important, but also look more broadly at what's going on in the world. What are the big changes happening? Be more aware of certain global trends, and try and link that with some of the reading that you do. What I find, and this is my own view, others might disagree with that, but as a recruiter, when I find that a candidate sitting across the table isn't able to apply any of what she or he has learned through the coursework, I find that a little bit problematic. I think a broader sense of awareness and consciousness of global trends is particularly important. I think at this stage, maybe you want to start thinking about, okay, there's a broad range of environmental issues. What are the issues that most interest you, and what are the problems that you might want to solve? In terms of career, I think there's a vast range of careers that are available today. What we do right now in Asia a few years ago wasn't available. So it just shows that this is an example of how new careers are popping up. So there are a lot of growth industries, and this also means that you could have asymmetric opportunities. Let's say, for example, if you were in a conventional career, you'd go through a long, drawn-out process of progression. There are opportunities that come up in these careers where you can move faster, but at the same time, remember that there are a number of individuals who are driven by values and driven by passion, and who are keen to move to these industries. So there's also a lot of competition. And finally, I think you want to also give, when you think of a career, is that there's a value proposition here, that when you look at a career, yes, monetary aspects are important, yes, what you do is important, but you need to be able to mentally give yourself certain value to the fact that you're in a career that you're passionate about and that you think is having a positive impact. I think that's particularly important. That's a guidepost for me. I find a lot of my friends from school, from other places, who are in investment banking and all sorts of places, and making lots and lots of money. And I don't see myself as someone who couldn't have done that. I could have done that. And I'm not saying do this or do that. I'm just helping you through what I think is that the value that I draw from, and I'm not saying I get paid poorly at all, so please don't think that either. But what I'd say is that there's a certain value and value premium that I attach to be able to work professionally in an environment that gives me certain satisfaction to it. Yeah, well, that's pretty much about as much as what I'd like to say. I'm always going to be open to questions later on once we're through all the panel discussions. Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much, JD. Like I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to hold all the questions to the end so we can have an engaged discussion, but make sure if you hear something at the beginning, write it down so you can come back to it later. Bhavani?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hastings, and thank you for inviting me. And thank you all for coming here. I'm going to stand because otherwise I'm going to get a neck ache at the end of the day. So thank you for showing up, because 80% of success is actually showing up. So thank you for being here. I'm going to also split my talk into 3 parts. First, I'll talk about my own career journey. Second, I'll quickly run through, give you a bird's eye view of green jobs in various sectors in Singapore. And finally, maybe give some general career tips. Happy with that? Thank you. Now, as a child, I actually wanted to become an astronaut. So I loved looking up at the stars at night. There wasn't much pollution, light pollution in those days. And I actually did enjoy maths and physics in school. But when it came to junior college, or grade 11, when we had to make a subject choice, guess what I took? Any guesses? Pardon? Geography. Geography is interesting. I ended up taking business studies or commerce. Now that sounds boring, right? Now at that time, it sounded like a very practical thing to do because we were a family of accountants. And when I went to my dad for advice, he said, you should take business studies. And at that time, I didn't have the courage to kind of pursue my dreams because I couldn't see, just as Dr. Hastings said, I couldn't really see the career pathways very clearly. So I ended up doing commerce in school and university. And I was, not surprisingly, very, very frustrated for a very, very long time. And how many of you know friends, or maybe some of you are in that situation where you've taken a topic because it's in thing or because your family members are doctors or lawyers? Raise your hands. Okay, a few of you. Right. So you know how it feels like. J.K. Rowling once said, now you all know J.K. Rowling, right? I assume all of you know J.K. Rowling. I would excuse the seniors, but you know Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling. Now J.K. Rowling, in her commencement speech at Harvard, and you can Google for it, it's really a brilliant speech. She said there's an expiry date for blaming your parents, right? So, I take full responsibility for my decision. And you know what? In the long haul, studying finance and economics actually really helped me get a broader perspective when it came to understanding environmental and sustainability issues. So you're really lucky to be in this space, especially those of you who are doing BES, to have such a mixture of courses from different disciplines, because we didn't have that choice when we were young. We were straitjacketed into science or business studies or humanities. So you're really lucky to have that kind of interdisciplinary perspective. So quickly going forward, I went into a career in finance in the oilfield services sector and aviation training for some time. And to kind of fast forward again, a couple of years ago, 2008 specifically, I had this huge wake-up call, and where I kind of woke up to the huge ecological crisis the world was facing, and I said, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. I have to do something to save the world, or at least make my conscience feel better that I was doing something. So this is how EcoWalk the Talk came about in 2008. It's a non-profit website. Now, I didn't know anything about IT, writing, environment, nothing. So I just felt, I knew I could write, and I was learning so much, and I just wanted to encourage people to take action. So I just set it up, And over the last 4 years, in fact, it's done well. Last year it was nominated in the Singapore Environment Council's Asia Journalism Awards as the finalist, up against big heavyweights like Singapore Press Holdings and Agence France Presse and National Geographic and all. So the last 4 years have been really, really fulfilling, probably the happiest period in my life. In 2011, I set up Green Collar Asia because I perceived a gap in the understanding of the green job sector amongst professionals. And I looked at my own skills and strengths, and I said, okay, I like connecting with people, and I like being of service to people, and of course I'm passionate about continuing to serve, advocate for the planet. So what do I do? And this idea came to me. I said, okay, let me set up Green Collar Asia. And at the back end, we are an executive search and recruitment firm. We help organizations, we work closely with them to place people, help people find jobs in that sector, in sustainability and environment, especially those with very, very specialized expertise and experience. We also conduct training and workshops for organizations to engage with sustainability, get their employees to engage with sustainability. So what's the moral of the story? You may not end up doing what you study in university. Now, there's a deeper moral, and that is passion. Now, do what you love to do. And there's a Chinese philosopher who said, do the work you love, and you would never have to work for the rest of your life. Right? And not just passion, it's actually passion with purpose. So if you combine that passion with a sense of purpose, not just to make a living, but in some way to give back, almost unconditionally, to give back to society, to solving, as Jaideep said, solving people's problems or society's problems, the biggest unintended consequence will be you'll end up being a very happy bunny. Right? So really, our journey has been to be at this intersection. We find ourselves today, myself in particular, at the intersection there. What I love to do, what I'm good at, and what I get paid for. And probably ultimately your career journeys will also reflect, or will be a pursuit to get to that star. Oh, so I've reached the stars, right? Okay, so now I'm going to talk about green jobs. Otherwise, Dr. K. Hastings will kick me out. So, where are the green jobs in Singapore? And I can only, given the time, give you a bird's eye view about various green job sector. And you can have these slides, so you don't have to jot them down, or I can't literally read them out. So I'm just going to give you a quick bird's eye view. So we all know what a green job is, right? I assume you're environmental students, most of you. So jobs which help reduce negative environmental impact, and they lead to environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable enterprises. Now you can figure that out. Okay, so where are the green jobs? Now guess who's the biggest employer of green jobs in Singapore? No surprises, it's the government. Right, and there are no official statistics, but my own guesstimate is it's like over 50% of the jobs are in the government sector, directly or indirectly. So, and there's an absolute, wide range of careers that you can pursue within the government sector. There are also think tanks in Singapore. Those of you who are looking at policy areas, becoming policy researchers or policy analysts, a wide range. I'm not sure, you have to investigate whether they take interns at the undergraduate level, but these are the people to go to ask. So in the private sector, you have some very niche environmental companies and sectors. Now, some of them have the depth that you have in the government. Now, maybe a few multinational, engineering and consulting companies, which may have a wide range of jobs and the depth in terms of numbers. But the rest of the sector is very scattered and fragmented, and some of them are very small players. So that's something to bear in mind. And of course, you've got sustainable investments, which Jaideep is a part of, ESG reporting and analysis. Okay, did I miss something? Consulting, yes. Again, you have some niche environmental consultants, like, say, in Singapore, some of them are multinationals. You've got ACOM, CH2, M-Hill, Worley Parsons. These are environmental service companies, and they provide a whole range of solutions. You could have sustainability wings in mainstream accounting and audit companies too. Yourself, you worked in E&Y, so E&Y, KPMG, Arthur Andersen, they have very small sustainability-oriented teams working on climate change and maybe carbon advisories. Mainstream companies, you're talking about your NTUC, CapitaLand, mainstream companies you find in Singapore, they would have CSR departments, sometimes fused with the communications department, which shouldn't be the case. But these are opportunities for some of you who are interested in getting into a corporate career, but with an environmental background. For companies with more complex operations who are deeper down in the journey of sustainability, you'd find green IT, green supply chain, and so on. NGOs, and we have a representative from WWF. I'm sure Dr. Isabel will share more. There are actually a lot of volunteering opportunities, if you're interested in volunteering, amongst the various NGOs. We're always looking for volunteers, so it's a great way to actually add that experience. And that experience, now I'm a recruiter myself, so I really place a lot of value to the volunteering experience. It really shows a lot about your personality. Now, when I have one resume with a person who's volunteered in an NGO versus one who is not, I can immediately sense what kind of a person that is, somebody who's willing to give back and who's willing to kind of do something beyond the call of duty. And don't forget media. Now, especially those of you who are skilled in communications or interested in that line of thinking, even if you're not, even if you don't want to join media, you will find that in many other areas you are expected to have very good communication skills. So interning for any of the media portals is actually a good idea because it immediately shouts out on your resume that you have good communication skills. So some are more open to having interns than others. We ourselves are, for example, Green Collar Asia. We're looking for interns to boost the website content. We do a lot of interviews with thought leaders in the green space. So it's a great learning opportunity. Right, so I've kind of summarized as well on my website how to jumpstart a green career. You can go back and look at that article. Right, so some generic career tips. Now, I didn't want to give you tips like, how to write a resume or how to do better interviews. If you want me back, I can spend a session on that. So I'm going to give you some generic career tips, which I hope will be of deeper value. I want to ask you a couple of questions to ponder over. One is, what kind of a person do I want and need to be when I complete my BES at NUS? Oh, some of you are not BES students, so you can replace that with whatever course you're doing. Really, what kind of a person do you visualize yourself at the end of your 4 years? And it's a good question to ask yourself, and maybe after the seminar, spend a few minutes in your room just drawing a mental map or a visual map of the kind of person you want to be and you need to be to get into a specific career. Because if you just walk into your future, it's going to be on default mode. If you have a picture of the kind of future that you want to reach, you can actually design your future. It's more a conscious process, and then you work backwards and say, hey, that's what I want to be, and these are the things that I need to do now in order to reach that. Does that make sense? Any examples? Do you want any examples? Let's say you want to be a policy researcher and you really want to join a think tank, right? So, visualize what are the skills that you need to become a policy researcher. You need good communication skills, you need to have the awareness about global events, and so on. So how do you build up those skills going forward? For example, you want to do business development or start your own enterprise, a green product company, at the end of your 4 years. So looking back, what kind of a person do you need to be as an entrepreneur? Need to be good in business development, which means going out connecting with people. You don't do that at the end of the fourth year, you start doing that now. How do I grow into a bigger me? Right? How do I grow? And I'm not meaning a physically bigger me and go to McDonald's and stuff yourself with more burgers. I mean, how do I become a bigger me in terms of your spirit, in terms of your enthusiasm and your energy levels? And if you're not excited about yourself, why would a prospective employer be excited about you? Right? So you want to see that energy level grow over the years, that positivity, the enthusiasm about yourself, about your life, about your opportunities, the kind of world that you want to create. So reflect upon that and see, what are the skills, the competencies, the mindset that you need to acquire. How do you go out of your comfort zone? Because if you stay within your comfort zone, you'll never grow. And what am I doing right now, doing from now onwards to build a profile matching the future me? So what are you going to do going forward? So you have a vision of the future me, and you're here now. This is your current reality. From now, what are the steps that you're going to take? So it's in sustainability, we call it backcasting. Forecasting is you forecast based on where you are now. Backcasting is you have a vision for the future, and then you say, what are the steps going forward? Okay, so how many of you, I'm just curious, how many of you are on LinkedIn? I didn't say Facebook. I know all of you are on Facebook. Now, I ask that because, this is one of the things that you can readily do. LinkedIn is, you may say, oh, I don't have a job now, I'm not a professional yet, but you can start right now because that's where you can connect with professionals in the space that you want to be in. Don't wait for 4 years from now, but you can start now and build a kind of dynamic resume, get yourself endorsed by maybe your professors or peers, get yourself endorsed from the internship, the people you do your interns with, and also continue to consciously network with people. And Singapore is a great way to network, great place, a very safe environment to network with completely new people. One forum that I would actively recommend, where we had Dr. Hastings, was Green Drinks. Have you heard of Green Drinks? Any of you attended Green Drinks? Okay, you can just find that group on Facebook, and Green Drinks Singapore. I'm a co-organizer. It's a great place to listen to new speakers in the environmental space and also connect with professionals from the private sector, government, and NGO space. And who knows, you might meet a prospective employer there too. So, yeah, I'm happy to take more questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bhavani. Next up, Dr. Lewis.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. How many of you know what WWF is? What do you see when you hear the word WWF? I'll tell my marketing people that you guys are. And what did WWF do in the last few days? Earth Hour. Great. So you know a lot about WWF. When I started my career, I didn't know anything about WWF. I was teaching in this room. I started my career in science. And my journey took me through academia, teaching, here in Singapore, here in US, research, until one day I said, do I want to do research? Do I want to teach? And I started looking out and seeing whether I can do something else. But the world has changed a lot. When I was teaching and studying, there was no internet, no Facebook, no LinkedIn. There was no degree for environment. There was no conservation program. So, people said, you want to do environment? You want to volunteer? You've got no money. How are you going to make money? Right? So that was the notion. If you're going to be in the environment, you're a volunteer, you don't get paid very well, it's a charity, or you're an activist like Greenpeace out there, calling for things and banning things. So that's how it was, because your world was restricted. You didn't have that access of information, right? Everything was limited to books and newspapers. So we've come a long way in terms of what you are very fortunate in actually going out there and seeing what there is about the environment, because it's all around us now. So WWF is the world's largest private conservation organization. It's present in over 120 countries. It's got about 4,200 permanent full-time staff. It's got board members who are corporate leaders, businessmen. It's got CEOs. It's got directors. Its structure is very corporate. We have auditors who come in and audit our books, just like any corporate company. Sometimes I go to meetings and I dress up, and I go to see a corporate, and they come to see me dressed down, and they go like, they dress down because they expect to see somebody from an NGO, and I dress up because I'm going to go meet a corporate. So the whole culture of what is the environment sector is still very interesting in terms of volunteerism, charity. But it's a serious job, because WWF is 52 years old. When it first started, the panda was a symbol, because how do you keep something that's black and white? It was chosen, the logo was chosen because if we were going to print something in paper those days, it had to be cheap. And printing color was expensive. Right? So, the panda, black and white. Right? Zebra? Because the panda was cute and cuddly. Right? And the first panda logo was a very, very chubby, fat panda. Right? Okay. So, but it was all about species, saving species, the most critical species in the world. So, it was called the World Wildlife Fund at that time. So, it was all about saving rhinos, tigers, pandas, and it was all about science. Doing quality science, having quality scientific work to back up why those species were endangered. So it always came with a reputation of scientific credibility and quality. So that meant that people who were joining WWF for conservation were scientists, people who were out there doing research on biodiversity. But over the years, as time went on, these places became more and more affected by threats. Pollution, logging, overfishing. And so in around 1984, WWF changed its name from World Wildlife Fund to the World Wide Fund for Nature, because conservation and environment was more than just species conservation. And today WWF's work is all about sustainability, sustainable development, balance between economic growth and conservation, because you have to be economically viable and grow at the same time you conserve. Okay? So if you walk into a WWF office, you will find scientists who are out there doing the field work. You'll find lawyers. You'll find economists. You'll find policy analysts. You'll find marketing staff. You'll find fundraisers. You'll find communicators. You'll find educators. Because it provides a vast area of work that needs to do conservation. It's just not about science. So WWF is an organization that started here in Singapore 7 years ago. When I came and met the Economic Development Board of Singapore, before I could give a talk, they actually gave me a presentation called WWF and Singapore. And they said, you are part of a spoke in the wheel of Singapore. Singapore is a hub. It attracts people from all over the world for corporate, for business, for science, banks. You are in there because increasingly, more and more, environment is going to be part of all those sectors. And we want the top international organizations coming to Singapore and working here in Singapore, bringing international issues to Singapore. And now in Tanglin Road, where we are based, there are over 100 international organizations from small operations to large operations based here in Singapore, looking at conservation and environment here in Singapore and in the rest of Asia. So how did I get here? I now am the Director for Asia Pacific of WWF offices. I manage offices and staff of about 500 to 1,000 based all around Asia. I manage people. I look after people's problems. I have to hire people. I have to fire people. I have to do budgets. I have to submit audits. I'm a manager. So how did I get here? I'm a scientist by background. I started in science, as you said. My family said, oh, you have to do science. I want to do geography, actually, but they said it's art subject. You cannot do geography. Right. So I did science. But as I was doing my science, I also got interested in nature. You know, I specialized in what is mycology, which is mushrooms. I studied in England. I used to go around the forest. I used to look on the ground and learn about mushrooms. And I got to enjoy the forest. So whilst I was doing my science, I got to enjoy nature. And my first job was here in NUS as a postdoc research scientist, teaching and doing research in the botany department that no longer exists. And I used to do my research in Bukit Timah Nature Reserve. And I used to volunteer for the the Singapore Nature Society. So I had to take students on walks, talk to them about the environment. So the love of nature whilst I was doing my work. But I never thought that I would actually get into this career. That was something that I like to do. And that's what many people do. They like nature, they get into nature, and you can do that. You can volunteer, you can give talks, you can take people out, you can be an intern in a company, you can be an intern in an organization. But after 4 years, I was sitting in the staff room here one day, and I saw all the lecturers, and I said, I'm not going to be here at this age, teaching here for all these years. You know, I don't think I can. I need to do something else, and I need to go and do more research and learn something new. So I started networking. Those days there was no IT. But eventually I left Singapore and I went to the US, where I did postdoc research at Harvard. And when I was at Harvard, I got again into nature walks and awareness programs. And then I decided that I was no longer interested in teaching. Right? I had jobs offered to me to teach and do research, and I said, I don't want to teach. So I didn't do anything for 6 months. I traveled, I came back home, and I saw a job from WWF Malaysia, asking for a scientific officer and an education officer. So I applied and I got it. I was based in Sabah in Malaysia to do a project to develop a resource management plan for the state of Sabah. That was my first entry into environment policy. And from there I went into leading the conservation program in Malaysia and eventually the international program in Switzerland, and then now back to Singapore. So a career in environment, you have to be very open. I think what you have now is a whole array of green jobs that Bhavana showed. But the thing is, you got to be flexible as you go along. You got to take risks, and you got to see, okay, and take opportunities. You know, you can be in the science sector and you can move into finance. You can move into fundraising. You can move into comms. But now people realize environment, conservation, sustainable development cuts across all these things in different ways. It's integral to everything we do. So when in Singapore you talk about food security, water security, energy security, it is environment. And so these issues become conservation environment issues. They're not different. There's a whole array of opportunities ahead in many of these issues to learn and grow into. And it's not about volunteerism. These are jobs. In many organizations and companies in Europe, when you go for interviews, actually the candidates ask the company, what is your sustainability program? What is your program? How do you look at ethics? And the employer has to tell the candidate how their company's principles are on the environment. And I guess that's our vision for Asia Pacific. When in this part of the world where we're not really used to charities, giving, conservation, when we start asking for ourselves, are we doing the right thing for the environment? Asia Pacific is now the place, an exciting place. It's growth. We've got the largest economies, China, India, Vietnam, Singapore. More and more issues of sustainable development are happening in Asia. China's footprint is huge. But the Chinese government is also very concerned about how it's going to protect its natural resources. We don't just do panda conservation in China. We do panda conservation. We have no choice, right? Right? Actually, when I go to Chengdu, they look at me and they say, look at my card, they go like, but my card has also got panda, right? So it doesn't do anything in China. But in China, we are working with the top Chinese banks to influence their investment policies. Because when a Chinese company or a Chinese bank gives a loan to a Chinese company who's planning to build a bridge or a building or a business in Africa, we are working with the Chinese banks to ask the right questions to the Chinese companies before they can get the loan. If in 10 years' time you are a business developer and you want to build a palm oil plantation and you want to get a loan from HSBC, HSBC will say, you have to tell me what you're going to do that will conserve the environment before I give you a loan. Credit Suisse and the bank will ask you first before you get the loan. And if you don't fill the criteria, you will not get the loan. So WWF is working with the top banks to make sure that how do they actually manage responsible investments. So there's a lot of things that are done quietly behind the scenes, but what we call it is you influence the drivers of change, right? So you become solution-oriented by influencing the drivers of change. The drivers of change are businesses, banks, economic drivers. We do training programs for accountants in PwC, KPMG, so that when they do the accounting, how do they cost the environment? So when you have an environmental plan, you cost the water, you cost the electricity, all these are part of the costing, what we call payment for environment services. Okay? So Bukit Timah Nature Reserve has economic value, environmental value, because it protects your water. It's got a value. So it's not just, it costs so much because it's got so much of trees and the land. This prime land here, it's worth 10 million. But the 10 million, you add the water value, you add the value of recreation, your value increases. That's the economic value. And we need people to do that more and more. So we are training accountants in banks to start looking at how they can actually calculate environmental factors into those areas. Oh, the scope is big. Scope is big. And the opportunity for you is that you can go IT, you can network, you got information, you Google, you can get all the information that we didn't have years ago. And you got people to talk to. I update my CV in LinkedIn as well, and I connect to people, and you can reach out. So be flexible, take risks, be open-minded. You're in the part of the world that's the most exciting in terms of sustainable development and sustainability. I think, as you said, look at the trends that are happening in this region in the next 20 years. There's going to be a lot of opportunities getting into sustainable development and environmental issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Annabelle, you're up.
Hello. Okay, thanks, Dr. Hastings. Wow, okay. How to follow from that? I think I'm one of the youngest here. I've only actually worked at MPAX for 3+ years. So I'll just talk a bit about my job at MPAX, because I think I'm the only government person here. So disclaimer first, what I say here is purely my opinion, and it's not like, because I'm in the civil service, so I have to say that. I mean, yeah, it's just my personal opinion. Yeah. So my job at NParks, I'm actually at the Coastal Marine branch. It's quite a young branch. I think it started only in 2004 or 2005. And actually NParks, in terms of coastal marine conservation and management, it's very young. Again, 2005, 2006. I think after Chek Jawa, certain things happened. You all know what happened at Chek Jawa, right? Okay. So after that, certain things happened. Government realized, okay, maybe we should start doing something about our coastal marine environment in terms of conservation. So the branch was set up. We have a few mergers, splits, organizational things, and currently we are about, I think, 12 people, 10 to 12 people looking at coastal marine conservation policy in Singapore. Yeah, so that's essentially what my office does. I can go into more detail later, but maybe I just talk a bit about my personal journey. It's quite different from Mr. Panwar's, right? Because I think from very young age I knew what I wanted to do. And my parents were also accountants, actually, but I did not want to, because I saw the spreadsheets, they took home a huge spreadsheet, like, I'm not going to do that. So I think because I watched too much TV when I was younger, you know, Channel 12, I don't know if you guys are too, Channel 12 used to be called Channel 12, but they show all the nature documentaries on it. It's before cable, it's when, you know, it was still free-to-air channels. So I for some reason, I wanted to be an astronaut, but then I realized that I was too short. Really, I was like, oh, me too. But I was too short, and then my eyesight was getting a bit worse, so I knew I couldn't, so I was like, forget it. And at some point, I decided, I think in maybe late secondary school or early secondary school, that I wanted to do marine biology. I don't know where the idea came from, but I just knew, okay, I just want to do marine biology. I don't want to be an accountant. I don't really like people. I'm being honest about my motivations back then. When I look back, it's kind of funny. But back then, I was like, I don't really like working with people. I'll be a scientist. I'll do marine biology. I'll do research. So I just focus on the animals, you know, that kind of thing. So that was my that was my motivation. And in JC, I had to take the medicine combination. I don't know if you guys are familiar, the triple science, physics, chem, bio, because back then that was the only combination where biology was included. Like if you took biology, you had to take physics and chem because it was medicine combi. So I took that medicine combi, struggled through physics, and then came for uni time lah. Came to decide where to go for uni, and I think the year that I wanted to apply to NUS, they scrapped the botany degree, they scrapped the biology degree, and they introduced the life science. So before there used to be, I think, a botany, biology, maybe zoology, and that year that I wanted to apply, they scrapped everything. And I was like, oh no, so what to do? And I was fortunate in the sense that my parents could actually afford to send me overseas. So I went over to Boston University to do marine biology specifically. I actually looked at scholarships also in Singapore. I was like, searching for scholarships, you know, search any of them, give me scholarships for biology and not life science, because I wanted to do more ecology, that kind of thing. That was my interest. Nothing, or at least, yeah, at that point in time, I didn't seem to have come across anything that would support this field of study. So I was like, heck Singapore. So I left. So I was like, I'm never coming back to Singapore. There's nothing here for me. And especially in government, I was like, there's nothing in government. Yeah. Ironic, very ironic. So I studied biology, and I think through my undergrad, it helped that I took quite a broad range of subjects, like economics. I took econs for the first time. Besides the traditional physics, chem, bio, so I had to do that, cell biology, physics, chem, bio, marine ecology. It's part of the major requirements. But then, because maybe the US system is a bit more liberal, I could take interesting classes like Greek mythology or Greek classic, you know. And so for me, I realized that what I thought I wanted to do. Like I guess like you said, broaden your awareness of what is going on in the world. And I think taking those classes and seeing the world more than just through the lens of, okay, research, save the world, it really helped me a lot. So by the end of my undergrad, I realized that maybe research wasn't for me. I took some classes, went into the field, and I enjoyed the field work. But then I realized that I actually wanted to do things which could actually make change. And I realized that in terms of research, yes, you collect the data, but after you get the data and you write your paper and publish in Science, what happens next? You know, so when I realized that, I was like, I would like to do something which more than just, you know, research, academics. So that's why I went to grad school to do an MEM, same, but in overseas also, and did more ocean law and policy, environmental economics, marine policy, and also did some GIS technical stuff. So for that, I was sort of broadening my skill set during that time. And actually, I didn't want to come back to Singapore. Honestly, I'll be honest with you, I didn't want to come back to Singapore. And I guess this is the part where things sometimes sort of fall into place, at least for me. I met up with somebody who was working at the National Parks Board through a friend of mine, actually, because she knew that I was into conservation. So she said, oh, this is where networking is actually quite important. And she said, you want to meet up with him? Then so I met up with him. This was like before I graduated from my master's. And he said, well, a lot of us are conservationists at heart, but in government, you need to know how to work the system in that sense. You need to know how the system works. So I was like, oh, okay. So, but basically, I was trying to manage my expectations that if you come to work in government, yes, you can. It's not like an NGO basically. You know, you need to take into account of a lot more things. So when I graduated, I was like, okay, maybe I'll consider. And it just so happened that there was an opening, and so I applied for the job, and I got the job. So I came back to Singapore. After saying I would never come back to Singapore and never work in government, I found myself in government. So it's quite ironic. But I think it's different now, because back then I don't think there was such a wide range of jobs in terms of environmental. I'm really glad, Bhavani, right? You went into the whole availability of jobs, because now it's actually growing quite a bit. So in terms of, I can give you some advice or maybe insights, what I've learned over the past 3+ years working in government. And a lot of this stuff they don't teach you in school. You don't, and maybe sometimes you have to walk through it before you realize, okay, these are the things that I need to actually work on. In working in government, I made like a list here. Okay. Working in government, working with people is very important. That's why it's so ironic. Cause I went into marine biology because I didn't like people, right? But now I'm working a lot with people, and you have to work a lot with the people, especially with other agencies. And I had to develop the ability to see things from different perspectives, as opposed to just my very silo research science perspective. And it helps when you have to work with other agencies and you have to get buy-in from other stakeholders, because you need to know where they're coming from, and then you can sort of negotiate and work out a common interest. Because if you keep on just butting heads with them, like nothing's going to happen in that sense. So we work actually quite closely with URA, and it's really, NParks is fortunate in the sense that we're in the Ministry of National Development. So URA is actually one of our sister agencies in that sense, and we work very well with them, because actually a lot of the planners are very green, because they do land zoning. I don't know if you are familiar with what URA does. So they zone land for different use, and actually a lot, I realized after working in government, a lot of the conservation is actually done there, and so we try to work with URA as much as possible to zone as much land for conservation as possible, green space as possible. Yeah, so developing the ability to see multiple agencies' perspectives, and poor URA always has to be like the mediator between all the different agencies that want land, JTC, SDC, NTI, MOT. So working with them, understanding where they're coming from, and trying to find, like, I don't like this word win-win. It's thrown around a lot in government, win-win solutions. Sometimes there's just no win-win, but we try our best to find a compromise that works for both sides. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, actually networking also, I realized that networking actually helps a lot also in government. If you know, sometimes it's more important who you know than what you know. And maybe it's the same for corporate, sometimes even NGOs. If I find out that I have a problem, the person, I won't call the person with that portfolio in, let's say, PUB. I will call my friend in PUB whom I know, and then she will help me to direct to the appropriate person. And if I go through that channel, I'm more likely to get a response, let's say. So I realized that knowing who you know is really more important than sometimes what you know. Not saying that you should neglect the technical part of your, learn, like, do your studies, but yeah, so that's the other thing. And then, okay, in terms of working for Singapore government, right, I like what you said about this is Singapore and the NGOs are just a spoke in the wheel, because I think working in government, I've developed this ability to see the bigger picture, or I need to. I'll go into a bit more in terms of what types of jobs there are in NParks. And it's possible to not take this big picture view, but because of the nature of my job and we're trying to push certain things through government, certain policies. So it's been necessary to see the big picture, and the big picture at the end of the day is Singapore. And the context at the end of the day is Singapore. So I've had to throw out a lot of the things that I've learned in the West, in Western literature, like Western thought in terms of conservation and how conservation is done. For example, the traditional, we just safeguard this piece of land, we don't touch it, or we only allow researchers and recreation to take place, may not work in Singapore. So I've had to throw up a lot of the Western, and even the way the NGOs work in the West is quite different from the way the NGOs work here. So the whole advocacy, tie yourself to a tree type thing doesn't work in Singapore either. So I have to, Annabelle was like, don't like butt heads with the other agencies, and meetings like try and think of ways to basically work with them instead of working against them. So I have to throw that one out too. So now it's how do you approach it from a solving problem thing, approach it from more, this is Singapore, this is the limitations that we have, and how do we carry out conservation, and in a way I'm realizing that it's different. Conservation in Singapore is different in the sense that it's a totally different science in that sense. I realize that in the government you can have all the data in the world, but at the end of the day the policy decision is made by a person. So it really depends on the person's value. So what I try to do, and what my colleagues try to do sometimes, is to try and change the mindset. It's a long drawn process, and sometimes we don't know if it's going to succeed, but we realize that if people's mindsets don't change, even if you present them the data, we have like 256 coral species in our waters. Hard coral species in our waters. We have don't know how many mangrove plants, Even if we do give them the data, at the end of the day, they'll be like, okay, so, yeah. I mean, that's reality in the Singapore government. So that's why the working with people part is quite important. And the good thing is that our enthusiasm actually rubs off. Like, I realized that with NParks, because the people are quite passionate in what they do, that when we interact with other agencies and we talk about it, the other agencies actually do empathize with us, at least at the staff level, and they definitely want to work with us a bit more now. So yeah, so that's what I've learned working in government. And I guess, like, don't be afraid of trying new things. don't pigeonhole yourself, maybe, you know. I mean, if you have if you know what you want to do, great, go ahead and do it. But be open to, maybe you get there and you realize, oh, this is not what I want. And maybe something else might come along, or you might try your hand at something else. And also, it might be also good to know yourself as well, like learn more about what you're good at. I know that I'm not cut out for entrepreneurship, but I'm not naturally inclined towards entrepreneurship. Because I'm not super creative in that sense. You give me boundaries. That's why I realized I actually work quite well in government. I know what the boundaries are, and I can see the system. I understand the system, and then I sort of find my own way as to how to work, how to use the system to accomplish certain things without, of course, of course, properly lah. You know, not like corruption in that. No. I mean, not going around the system in that sense, but using the system and working within that system properly to get what your desired outcome. So yeah, that's what I learned, and yeah. So again, I realized it's a growing journey. Like before, so I realized that a lot of my experiences, even in school, like handling CCA stuff, doing logistics or events, that kind of thing, actually helps a lot in government, project management especially, the skills, like timelines, finance, that kind of thing, because a lot of that within an organization you will encounter. Yeah, so I think that's about it for me. Do you want me to go into the types of jobs that you can do at MParks, or do you want to? Okay, so at MParks there are people who do field work. The conservationists, there's a conservation division, and they are more operations based. So their offices are located in the nature reserves, Bukit Timah, Central Catchment, Sungai Buloh, and Labrador. Interestingly, Labrador Nature Reserve is not managed by Conservation Division. It's managed by our park site. It's a long story. It's all historical. It doesn't make sense when you look at it, but when you understand the story behind it, you're like, okay lah. It makes sense from that perspective. And interestingly, Istana falls under the Conservation Division. Again, it's a historical personality issue. So that's the ops side. They do on-site research, some monitoring, some surveys, but they also do a lot of outreach and a lot of maintenance on the ground in terms of maintaining the trails, visitor services, that kind of thing. So that, you know, your park visitors go there, like the bridge is working and things like that. So a lot of on-the-ground ops. Then we also take care of the trees. This is not conservation per se, but we also have streetscape, which they take care of all the roadside trees. We also have parks. They take care of parks like Botanic Gardens, Beecham Park, all the neighborhood, not all neighborhood parks. Some of them are by HDB, but the bigger, I think, neighborhood parks we also take care of and develop. And then my division is National Biodiversity Center. We do a bit more of larger scale biodiversity survey. So there are officers that do a lot of field work, but I'm not one of them. So they go into multiple surveys have been done on coastal marine environment, on nature reserves, nature areas that are outside of nature reserves, because there are those. And for myself, we do more policy and like trying to nudge agencies to be a bit more environmentally friendly in that sense, and more conservation minded. And also a big part of our job actually is fighting fires, because we're in government, so we fight a lot of fires. Like public quality service management, they'll shoot us a question. This member of the public asked what this insect is. Can you please advise on how to, little things like that. Government has to sort of answer. So you fight fires like that. And then on the other hand, a major part is also project management, because we collaborate a lot with NUS, DHI, which is actually a private consulting firm. and they actually do a lot of the research in our waters, and we actually collaborate with them on certain research projects also. So that's quite a main thing. So there's actually a wide spectrum of jobs at NParks at least, and probably even more now across the government. Yeah. So okay, I think I've talked enough. I'm so sorry. But yeah, ask questions.
Thank you very much. Well, my microphone stopped working for some reason. Want to give another thank you to all the panelists. There we go. Anyway, why don't we just go ahead and open this up for questions, comments, and start a discussion about some of their experiences and tips. The first one's always the hardest. If you could go to the microphone, actually, that would be best. I think this is being recorded, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Firstly, thank you everyone for sharing. It was very, very informative. I have a question for Ms. Ng. Yeah, alright. You mentioned that earlier on that you weren't really looking to go into a governmental sector, and often I always get a lot of people looking at me. When I tell them I'm interested in marine conservation, they're like, it's limited. There aren't a lot of career opportunities in Singapore related to marine conservation. So with the exception of NParks, right, if let's say you had to go back and you had to choose another organization to work with or somewhere else to work with that wasn't governmental, where would you go to? And taking into consideration that it has to be in Singapore.
Not government.
Non-governmental. Or is it like so geared towards governmental that it is very, very hard to go non-governmental?
It's not hard. I guess it depends on what you're looking for. I guess if I wasn't in NParks or in government, I would either be doing research at NUS, or I'd be with one of the environmental consulting firms in Singapore, because they actually do a lot of government contracts in terms of, let's say, EIAs and things like that. NGO would actually be my number one. I would be in an NGO, because there's still this part of me that's very like tree hugger. Then the second would be academics, and then maybe third would be environmental consulting firm. Yeah.
Alright, thanks. Oh, sorry, can I quickly add something? Okay. Yeah. You also mentioned that when you came back from an overseas education, that there were a lot of things that you couldn't apply. So taking that into consideration, right? If let's say, okay, right now, I'm interested in marine conservation and I applied for the BES, but there aren't any marine biology degrees in Singapore. So would it be a better option to go overseas to study and then have to figure out all this conversion and how it works in Singapore? Or would it be better to have an education in Singapore that isn't necessarily concentrated on marine biology but still very relevant to environment?
Wow.
Sorry. Anyone can answer. Yeah.
I can't say because I've not taken the other route.
Yeah.
I think it's about being a bit broad-minded, because all these issues are actually what we call cross-cutting, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got a passion in marine, you can enjoy it in different ways, right? You can go diving. Singapore's got the largest number of divers per GDP country in the world. So you can go diving, right? You can join volunteers, you can join the Nature Society, you can do surveys and all that. But the impact of marine and the marine environment is like pollution, climate change. There are Singapore companies that are going and building ports, building hotels around Asia. They are looking for environmentalists to come and work in their company, so that when they're building a hotel in Thailand, they want somebody with environmental background in marine to help them assess their projects. So sometimes you got to look sideways, not just look at that way. You got to look at what is it around that issue, and then you can actually open up your opportunity.
Yeah, actually, oh boy, I would say I was glad that I actually had my grounding in science and very focused, because now because we do come across technical things even in NParks, and I do have some of my colleagues who they do coral monitoring and stuff like that. So I think I appreciated that really grounding in science. In terms of Singapore versus overseas, okay, I'm biased. I think that in terms of the quality of education, if you are looking into marine biology overseas, is still definitely better. But I wouldn't say the US, because I did like temperate stuff, which can't really be applied in Singapore. So a lot of the knowledge that I have is actually in between my grad and undergrad. I came back for a year and I hooked up with Ria Tan. I don't know if you've heard of her, Ria, and then went out with her because again I was of the mindset, there's nothing in Singapore. But then I was like, oh, okay, there's something left in Singapore, and from there, because my grounding was already in science, you can pick up a bit faster, the technical things. So my preference would be, yes, overseas if you're looking in marine biology, maybe Australia, because they do have some really good programs there, and then more specific technical first, and then but at the same time keeping, building an awareness lah. Yeah, and it's not everyone in NParks is like me, because I know of it's a very wide range of backgrounds of people in NParks. People came from poly, then after that they went overseas to do like a master's on their own, that kind of thing, and then they came back, and some of them have geography background or even real estate. There's a guy with real estate background in NParks, because now it's a lot of it is on valuation, so his inputs are quite valuable. So it's not necessarily you have to go a science. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
Hello. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kenny. I'm a first-year life science student here at NUS. So I noticed that for tonight, right, the panelists have been talking a lot about stuff at the policy level, like funneling the money to the right places and all that, so that we can make a change for the environment. So for me personally, my interest is in research. I very much hope to pursue a research career. So all these talk from the panelists tonight have gotten me a little worried, because it seems to me right now that what a researcher can do is limited. So my question is, in the big picture, what exactly is the role of research in terms of when put in context of all this environmental work?
All right. I'm not entirely sure what research you're talking about, but if you look at us, we call ourselves as an environmental, social and governance research provider to institutional investors. So what our analysts do is look at companies and look at how they are facing environmental challenges, how they're planning with various environmental trends in mind, and also what kind of impacts they have. So we do research and we provide that research to institutional investors. So it's part of the ecosystem in a sense. So if you think that research is a bad word, no, it's not. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just to be more specific, I'm talking about scientific research. For example, the previous young lady who asked the question, she's into marine biology. Personally, for me, I'm into freshwater biology. That's the kind of research I'm talking about, scientific research.
My friend at PUB, she's actually a biologist, I guess the thing about government is that it's hard to find a position that's purely research. Just have to let you know, in terms of field work. I mean, there are people who go out into the field a lot. Okay, actually maybe that's not true. I wouldn't know, okay, because my friend at PUB, she does go into the field to sample, but she's also a project manager. So a lot of times, government tends to outsource their research. So they work either with consulting firms who will do the water quality monitoring for them or monitor the insects in the reservoirs, etc., etc. Wait, are you talking about freshwater swamps in Singapore, or are you talking more about reservoirs when you say freshwater research?
Talking more about swamps, but I guess I am open to the reservoir, that kind of thing. Okay.
So the only freshwater swamp that I think we have right now is in Yisun.
Yeah.
And I think there's only one guy in my division who's working on freshwater shrimps and crabs. Yes. So, but that's just only part of what he does. I don't think he focuses on all of that all the time. You see, so in a sense, it's not that you can't do that. There's no more opportunity for that. There is opportunity for that. But at the same time, usually it's part of a spectrum of other things that you do in government. Yeah.
Sorry, may I just clarify first? I'm not really asking about opportunities in terms of these research opportunities, because I know where to get them. But what I'm more concerned about is how does research fit in the bigger picture of environmental conservation and awareness.
And then you can, I think researchers play a very important role. And I say, for example, when I run Eco Walk the Talk, the main issue is that researchers tend to be in ivory towers, and much of that work is not accessible to the public. So I personally speak to very prestigious academicians, and I say, come on, bring that to public domain, simplify it. Why do you keep it there? So you have an important role. At one level, you have to publish those all that research in academic journals and get your peer review done. But you also, and you'll find that equally fulfilling, is how you simplify that message, see how you can apply it, and make that accessible to the man on the street or person on the street. So, and that's something you can find avenues to do that, by giving public talks, by writing in journals, and engaging with people, taking them for guided tours, and so on. So there are many, many different ways by which you can find that fulfilling role, which you may or may not find in your job scope.
I think for WWF, like I said, everything we do in policy is based on science. So research underpins everything we do. So a lot of our staff, what we call in the field, are researchers. We have freshwater biologists, we have marine biologists, we have climatologists, scientists. So we look for people who have degrees in science, who have papers published. And if we don't have them in WWF, if we don't have a project that needs a researcher, we go to universities. So academia is a very key player for us, because they have the data, they've got the science. So a lot of our conservation work is linked to scientific research. So if you want to make a comment about why the climate is changing, we have to use scientific facts. If you want to advocate for dams in the Mekong River, we've got freshwater biologists, we go to the scientists. And actually, one of the things that I remember was when we had a lot of discussion on climate, NUS, I was surprised, had a lot of scientific researchers here looking at the temperature of marine seawater, the seas around Singapore, and the best scientific data was coming from NUS. So I think, as she said, it doesn't come out; it's hidden. And if you come with academic background, you know where to go and find it. But if you're a corporate person, you may not know that the information is sitting in the university. So we really encourage you all to get it now into the websites, into your sites, and promote your work. And you'll be amazed. People will come looking for you.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, is there something?
Sorry, you were saying that how does research factor into decisions?
Yeah, that's right. I just want to see how does research work in the big picture. What happens to a published work? So, for example, someone working on something as niche as maybe the shape of a crab's leg or something like that. Eventually, how does this information get put to use?
Well, I can't say for the rest, but in government, oh gosh, you want the real reality?
Yeah, please go ahead.
not much. I think for government, I realize that one thing that policymakers tend to they want the Cliff Notes version of things. So they are maybe interested in how many species, is it endemic to Singapore, can it be found anywhere else in the world, that kind of thing. But they don't want to go into the detail, that kind of detail. Yeah, so for policymakers, and it has to be, the language has to be definitely not academic, because most people, when you talk to them in agencies, they don't get all this stuff, and you sort of have to bring it to a more layman perspective. Yeah.
So, for example, for MParks, so if we do have an endemic species, how is it of value to MParks and to the government, to Singapore in general?
I guess it's something that we bring to, from NPark's perspective, it helps us to prioritize certain habitats and patches in Singapore that, which are more important, which are not so important, because right now, okay, this is being recorded. Okay, then I can't say a lot of things. Okay.
Cover the mic and say.
Is a lot of it is we bring up this info when we need, let's say, ammunition to support certain things that we want to support. Like when we say, oh, please don't build an MRT track through, let's say, CCNR. Why? Then we'll dig out all this information. Then we'll negotiate with LTA, or can we do it this way, or can we, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Hello? I'll just take my prerogative as the moderator to make my own comment about that, actually. I think both Annabelle and Isabel talked about this boundary between science and policy sometimes, and people in the academic field and outside of the academic field. There has to definitely be a very concerted effort for scientists to engage with policymakers and managers, because if they don't make an effort to engage, they're not going to read every single journal publication that's out there. They're not going to be going through those things. There needs to be active engagement, and there needs to be simplification of the language and direct connections to the people who need to hear the key messages. Would you all agree with that, General? Okay. Other questions?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for being here today and sharing with us all of your thoughts and everything. I've learned a lot from it, so thank you. And my name is Xing Yi. I'm a Year 1 Environmental Studies student, and I have two questions for you today. And the first one is a more personal one, and the second one is a general one. So my first question is something that I've thought of quite some time ago, and I really appreciate the input I'll get from you guys. Okay, so the first one is on language, because I have great interest in the environmental sector in developing countries, so I'm wondering what language should I take, and if possible, which country offers the most, the best kind of environment for people like myself to go into as a starting point. So I have looked into taking Thai and Hindi and possibly Vietnamese, but I'm not sure which one should I go for. So I would really appreciate the insights from you guys.
Mandarin?
Yeah, I do speak Mandarin.
Then good for you. Because I think the most important language for environment in the coming years in Asia is going to be Mandarin.
Thank you.
All right, and you can get a job anywhere in Asia or anywhere in the world if you speak Mandarin. So Singaporeans have got a good advantage. But if you want a second language of those three, I think Vietnamese will be a good one because that's going to be a growing economy and a lot of environmental issues, and a lot of Singapore companies invest in Vietnam, so there's a lot of potential.
Hello. I'm not sure how strategic Hindi would be because only 40% of India speaks Hindi, and you go anywhere in the south, nobody understands Hindi. So India has 4,000 languages, so so really, unless you're very, very clear you're going to work in the north of India, people in the cities all over India do understand Hindi, can speak. But really, environmental issues, talking about rural areas, the local language, local dialects. So that's something. Maybe Vietnamese is a more homogeneous country, more homogeneous language. Yeah.
Thank you.
And you can get by with English in India, actually.
Yeah. I've been told that.
And sign language.
Okay, my second question is, what skills or qualities do you think is most important for a career like yours, whereby you're leading large important groups of organizations and individuals? Yeah. Qualities. Okay, maybe I should repeat myself. Okay, what qualities do you think is most important in this career, whereby you're leading large groups of important people and organizations to come to a compromise and get them to focus more on environmental issues? Thank you.
I think that is the biggest, you can have all your facts, you can all your figures, but my experience has been you have to make the emotional case, and that is, it's not a skill to be acquired. It's really when you really understand the core issues as far as the environment is concerned, I think that will come through. And you've mentioned a lot, actually, in terms of risk and, yeah.
Yeah, this is part of our job. It's relationship building, it's building trust. Because everybody's got a different reason everybody wants to grow and develop. So you want to put balance into the equation. So you got to come and say that I'm an equal player with you, right? I understand what you want, but then how do we get to see the bigger picture? So you got to build trust. You got to listen. You got to show that you know what they are doing, and that you are actually coming with solutions. So you're coming very open with positive for joint solutions, as opposed to saying that you've got only certain views and this is what you want. But in Asia, it's a lot about trust. It's about communications, and it doesn't happen over a meeting. It usually happens over when you're eating, you're socializing. So you got to find the right environment in the Asian culture where to have these conversations, relaxed, and then you got to know when to then come to the correct decision point and negotiate.
Well, I was going to say something similar. I was going to say something quite similar, but I think maybe if I'll add a part, not about leading teams and things like that, but when you're speaking, we speak with businesses, and it's important to speak their language. That's the business language, making a business case. So I think that's just the only add-on to what's been said for me.
You might only pick up as you go along on the job, even, or actually through experiences. In government, when to know when to put things in an email and to know when not to put things in an email and pick up the phone. Yeah. So a lot of things I learned through conversation over the phone, not necessarily at meetings, because minutes are taken, things like that. Yeah, it's quite interesting. in essence, just discretion, and I think that one you sort of pick up through experience, and it applies in government, it applies in corporations, NGOs. Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Other questions? Oh. No, one then the other.
Okay. Hi, I'm a year 4 geography major. My question is similar to this guy's question because I'm sorry, but okay, I'm really interested in research. Primarily climate change and hydrological processes. And I used to want to work in government bodies until I heard what you said. Unfortunately, because as in I believe in how research should actually play a big role in policy making, and I feel that especially in Singapore, I think there are a lot of environmental issues that we should be taken into consideration and something that government should be doing actually. But if that's not the case, then I don't think I want to be in an organization that does not look into that. So does that mean I should be going into private or NGO sectors instead? Yeah, I know that there are more other factors that is we have to take into consideration when it's a government setting. Yeah, but I mean for my own, because I really want to pursue research, and I like what you said previously when you wanted to do research, you were thinking about putting it into policies. You want things to change, and I guess I'm probably at that stage where you were thinking about that as well. So should that mean I should pursue my career in private? Because right now, I'm in a year 4 and I'm like finding jobs now. So should I go towards, NGOs or private rather than government? And if I do go into private and NGOs, would there be areas where I can actually do research and hopefully, make change somewhere?
Is that some of these issues that they face in government, you face them elsewhere as well. So don't let those bog you down. That's my simple comment to this. If you're interested in research and you look at an organization that's interested in the research that you do, it's as simple as that. The other factors you'll have to deal with anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's just starting your career. So don't think you're going to, say you're starting a journey.
Yes.
So be very open and flexible. Don't think I want this and I get there. I think all of us have that experience. We all didn't go saying I want this and and that is it. You're just starting, and you can start anywhere, right? But the main thing is you're committed to research.
Mm-hmm.
So you should keep one thing very, very focused.
Okay.
Right? Keep one thing very focused, the core. Then around that you can be flexible and move on. But we need people who are committed to research as well, right? And I have staff, I have colleagues who sometimes rest of their life all they want to do is research, and we say fine because we need you, right? But then sometimes suddenly there's a good scientific. I had a scientist who was always working on turtles in Malaysia, in the middle of the night counting turtles. So I was one day in the field looking at turtles coming up in Terengganu, and then he said to me, Isabel, if I'm going to save my turtles, I guess I need to stop counting turtles, but go and see what the petrochemical is going to stop putting lights on the beach, right? So he made the conscious decision that day that he was going to apply his skills and knowledge as a scientist to go and talk to the company. And he was very credible because he was a scientist talking with facts. So you'll find your way. You may either be always the scientist and research that people want, or one day you might say, I want to go and do it a different way. But your journey is just starting. So be open and flexible. Don't get all, what am I going to do? What am I going to do now? Right? Enjoy.
I would just add to that, just follow your passion, because the way will be shown to you. I don't know how many turns I've made, and just started a company and started a website. I didn't know anything, but I just had this core desire to make a change, and I think you have it too. We need a hell of a lot of climate change researchers in the world, as far as I can see. and the planet Earth needs you. So, just go on with that inner conviction, and you'll find opportunities. Don't analyze too much. You'll find the opportunities.
You and he can work together. You go to the swamp, you go and do the climate research.
Hello. I think we're going to have to move on. There was one more question in the front. It's already 8 o'clock, so I'm aware of everyone's time. But
Thank
they
you
may
so
be
much.
willing to stay afterwards. We had a question in the front. We have time for one more question, so if you do want to ask, you can go. Oh, no.
Hi, Dr. Lewis. Okay, I just want to know, what does WWF do in Singapore? As in, in the surrounding areas, you do a lot, save the orangutans, that kind of thing. But what about in, Singapore itself? Yeah. Thank you.
A lot of field conservation, because there's a lot of other organizations. Help to raise awareness about issues that are relevant for Singaporeans. So, for example, one of our biggest campaigns here is seafood, because everybody loves seafood. You love your chili crab, right? But one day your chili crab, you're not going to get crabs to eat chili crab, because somewhere in Indonesia or the Pacific, the environment is being destroyed, right? So you as a Singaporean can help make the choice of asking for seafood that comes from places that are managed and conserved well, that benefit communities. And we have places. So what we're doing is we have a seafood guide in Singapore, a seafood guide in Malaysia, a seafood guide in Hong Kong, that you can say, okay, if I choose this fish, this fish is coming from a place that is well managed and is sustainable. So Singapore is part of the consumer area. So we are here teaching Singapore's, raising awareness about how Singaporeans can contribute to sustainability of natural resources, whether it's food, paper, water, and make the choice that helps you, but also helps places and people where those resources come from.
Thanks. I think that's a great way to end the session. That was absolutely fantastic. I know I learned a lot. So why don't we give one last big thank you to the panel, please. All right, and thank you all for coming. They may or may not be able to stay afterwards, but I hope you learned a lot, and thanks for participating in this discussion. Have a good night.
Excuse me? It was you who asked the question, right? Or was it you?
Okay. Special to something. I'm gonna go down actually.
Fine.